Good. Busy day at the office, the first of the month. It's always interesting. However, diving right at the topic, Bitcoin was down today. 2%.
Bitcoin was down today?
Bitcoin was down today. So actually, let's do some stats here to start the video. So for the last month, Bitcoin has been up 11 point, almost 12%. And a year to date, Bitcoin is up 58% as of the recording
Insane.
of this video.
And I also have some stats, Falc.
Okay.
More stats. A year ago, Bitcoin was worth $28,000, which sounds like a lot, but that was after being at around $65,000. So it went down and now it's back up. But if you look at it big picture over the past 5 years, Bitcoin has grown 1,200% compared to the S&P, which has only grown 80%, which is pretty good for the S&P.
Right.
But Bitcoin has just been insane over the past year. It's grown from $5,000 to $68,000. And Bitcoin's market cap, which can be calculated by multiplying the price times the total amount of Bitcoin, the supply of Bitcoin out there, is at $1.3 trillion, which is larger than Meta, Berkshire Hathaway, Tesla, Walmart, and Visa, which is insane.
Right.
But if you compare it to gold, which is a store of value, gold has a market cap of $15 trillion. So this is where the argument comes that people say that it still has a lot of room to grow, which is what we'll have a friendly debate today in this video. Disclaimer, at least personal disclaimer, I know very little about blockchain and the technology behind it.
Did you study it at all when you were in college? I mean, considering you did finance and accounting, did you do anything about the crypto?
No, just like current events, like classic current events in class. People would talk about it. The professor would probably say something, but no, I didn't take any classes specific to crypto or Bitcoin. I just have the investing experience that I have, reading and history, but nothing Bitcoin related. What about you, Falc?
I didn't take I think classes are not going to be part of the curriculum for at least a little bit. I think there was like an elective. I did study it in an international business class, and that's where I learned like how actually mining of Bitcoin is. And I think it's interesting with the market cap that you mentioned of Bitcoin, that is like the total supply. So the total supply of Bitcoin is capped at 21 million. And right now they've mined how much? I think it's 19.
Something like that, but that's something actually that I didn't know until today, until I was researching that it's a limited amount of Bitcoin that you can get.
And even crazier, something that I did also learn recently is when the guy that designed Bitcoin wrote the white paper, which the name is out there, but the actual person that wrote it's not officially known who it is. He designed like the code and the structure and everything. So every time you mine an additional Bitcoin, the mining of the next Bitcoin is even harder. So like, right. I think the stat was like, if you plug your computer in 2009 and you try to mine a Bitcoin, it will take you like a few months. And now if you plug your computer with, the level of electricity that you have at home, it will take you like 98 years. So Every time it's harder to mine, which is why like the supply, it's not going to be reached that fast.
And now there's like massive rigs that I'll put a picture here where people just people get to mine Bitcoin. But like you said, at 21 million, the supply is that's the maximum amount of Bitcoin that there can be in the world. You can't create more Bitcoin, which could be a pro. We could start it as a potential pro because it creates scarcity. Right. And there's a limited amount of Bitcoin, and if you have a limited supply and the demand keeps increasing, the way the supply and demand curve works, the price is going to keep increasing because there's a limited supply, and people lose their accounts, people have lost Bitcoin, so there might be less than 21 million Bitcoin out there. So maybe that scarcity is going to help its price in the future. Who knows? It's not like the dollar that you can just print more. That's actually something that I found out today and could be a pro. Could be a pro. What do you think?
It could be a pro. However, it's as long as there's demand for the actual currency.
Exactly.
Because I mean, so exactly. Gold. So compared it to gold, which I think is the most common comparison, gold also has a limited supply, but there's always going to be a demand for gold, especially before when currencies were backed by gold. But if people just stop using Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. There's a limited supply. It's just not gonna be relevant. The also the funny thing is what you mentioned of how people have lost like wallets that have Bitcoin. I think there was a story of someone that lost a wallet that was worth like a few hundred million or a few tens of millions of dollars in like a random trash like somewhere. So he hired like thousands of people to try to find it, and they just can't find it.
I think it might be the same story or not. Like he lost his password or something.
Yeah.
And he lost a bunch of Bitcoin. But yeah, like you said, I mean, at the end of the day, gold has another use, which could be in luxury or could be used for other things because it's a physical object. If at the end of the day, Bitcoin ends up being a fad and in 5 years, everyone or most people forget about Bitcoin, the demand's going to go down. And like you said, like there's nothing holding its value. And that could be our first con. It was actually my first con, is that as an investor myself, I try to invest in things that have an intrinsic value. So when you look at a company like Apple, like Microsoft, these companies have people working in them, factories, they have a product that they sell to people, whether it be software or a physical product. And bearing any catastrophe or a fraud like Enron or FTX, the odds are that it's not going to go away. It's not going to go to zero from 1 year to the next. And even if it does, and you're probably invested in an index fund, so you're diversified. With Bitcoin, in my opinion, taking away the technology, there's nothing stopping Bitcoin from going from 68,000 like today to zero tomorrow.
I agree 100%. Yep. The issue is that Bitcoin right now has a use. There's many places where you can go and buy in Bitcoin. For example, Tesla is very famous for accepting Bitcoin for their cars. And there's only one country that actually has it as a widely used payment system. Do you know which one it is?
No.
El Salvador.
Nicaragua.
Not El Salvador. Which is crazy because...
Central America, I got it close enough.
Which is crazy because El Salvador didn't actually have their own currency. They always used the dollar, and now they're being huge proponents of Bitcoin. And this is the issue with the currency. Like Barney and I can create talk to see dollars. It's as useful as people accept it. Like the actual dollar itself, it's not something that has any value, or it's not something that you can use. Like you were talking about gold before. Gold, besides the value it has as luxury, gold, for example, is a great transmitter of electricity. So if people decide that gold is not a cool thing anymore, they can actually use it for electricity and other purposes. The dollar, you can't really use it even to write on because there's no space. But you know that every single place in the world, or 95% of the world, people are going to accept it. The issue with Bitcoin is there's only one country that officially accepts it, and all the other places are still a little hesitant. I mean, to finalize from the point of view of the investment, the sole reason why I don't invest in Bitcoin is because I can just invest in the S&P 500 and I know it's going to give me 7.9%, and it's a product that I like. I feel like so many people invest in Bitcoin because Bitcoin is actually fun. Like it's interesting, like it's like private and you don't know who created it, so it's entertaining. But I think the S&P has been working so well for so long. I don't think you have to get fancy with it.
And at the end of the day, people look at history, and obviously like we mentioned, in the past 5 years, it's returned more than 1,000%, which you can't get that in any other investment. Right. But historic performance does not indicate future performance. And if anything, it might indicate a bubble, or it might indicate that it's going to underperform the S&P in the future, or maybe it overperforms it. No one knows. But what worries me, what I mentioned before, is that there's no intrinsic value, and it's very volatile. Like we mentioned, a year ago it was at 28,000. A year and a half ago it was at 68,000. This year is back at 68,000. I think we both agree that as investors we prefer an average return, which is 8 to 10%. But we know that it's not going to be volatile. Yeah, it might go down 1 year, but over a long period of time, we know what we're going to get because it's what's been happening for the past 100 plus years. And each company in the S&P 500 has some kind of intrinsic value. We don't know if Bitcoin is going to exist in 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And that's what worries me as an investor, personally.
Right. So, but let's say that it does exist in 15, 20 years, as more of a foreign currency, because maybe when the euro started, which is a more of a recent currency, maybe some
Yeah.
people started looking at it as an investment because, it was the first time that so many countries came together and there was like the single currency and they were banking on it going down or low in value. But I'd say that Bitcoin is used as a form of currency. One benefit that it does have, one pro, is the ledger system, like the word, the technology. The technology is actually amazing. Like the technology, I think even Ramit Sethi, which is also a big hater of cryptocurrency, he says that the technology and the code behind Bitcoin is amazing, and the technology of
So in dumb words, because you probably know this more, but in my understanding, it's that it's a chain of blocks, literally a blockchain, and every time there's a transaction, a new block is created that is independently verified by many computers. And so it's impossible, I think, to forge or falsify a transaction through Bitcoin or through the blockchain, which makes it very useful because if in the future you want to track concert tickets or have a federal ID like a passport in the blockchain, you know that it's real because it's in the blockchain and you can't fake that because the technology is so advanced. So that is pretty impressive and definitely a pro that we have to mention.
I mean, that's why when NFTs came around, which are not the same but are related because of blockchain, I always said that I don't like NFTs, I don't like Bitcoin, but I'm a huge fan of the blockchain. Like the blockchain is here to stay.
Right.
Like I really think the blockchain is here to stay. When NFTs, and I'm not gonna get into that, but paying $1 million for a picture of a monkey, no, I kind of knew that was not gonna be a good investment. However, the fact of what people say that in 10 years, all of our concert tickets are not going to be QR codes, are not going to be Apple Wallet tickets, are just going to be NFTs. I would invest in that 100% because the technology itself is really good. The issue is that currencies are just as good as people are willing to take them. You can go to my house right now and you can pay me with that Yankees hat. If I don't have a value, if I don't have an appreciation, if I don't know it's a good material and stuff, I'm not going to use it. I'd rather just go to the middle, which is the dollar. And I think that's what's going to end up happening with the Bitcoin.
Yeah, and to go further, not to go back to it as an investment, but even like to your example, investing in the euro when it first got released or when they first made it, is that there's so many cryptocurrencies out there that you don't, who's saying that Bitcoin is going to be the one that's going to be successful or it's going to exist in 30, 40 years. Maybe Bitcoin has a competitive advantage that we don't know about, or I don't know about because I'm not an expert. But if you look at the internet bubble in the 2000s, there were a ton of companies that promised to do many great things, and that obviously the internet ended up being the technology that it is today. But only a few out of the companies that were blowing up in the 2000s exist today and are successful today. So who's to say that Bitcoin specifically is going to be the currency that's successful in the future, and not Ethereum or not another currency that we don't know about? That's something that I don't understand yet, and maybe no one does. Like maybe there's no competitive advantage to Bitcoin over other cryptocurrencies.
And even people that are really into cryptocurrencies usually hate on Bitcoin because Bitcoin is just so widely used and people know so much about it that they feel like there's a lot of more value on other like smaller coins. But even with that, one of the issues also with Bitcoin is widely accepted. There's easy to get it. Banks still have a lot of regulation when it comes to you being able to hold Bitcoins. And even the ETFs. So one of the big reasons why Bitcoin has gone up in value so much is because the SEC just allowed there to be spot ETFs. So ETFs that track Bitcoin. If you want to have an ETF that tracks a certain product, it can be the S&P, it can be Bitcoin. You have to actually go and buy that product and have it in-house so you can then sell shares of the pie. Like I always sell, like portions of the pie.
Right.
That buying and selling creates a lot of demand, and if supply is the same, the price is going to go up. So that's one of the reasons why Bitcoin has gone up so much. Even for those ETFs, it's not as easy to buy because a lot of banks just don't want to have that risk. So even if the product is amazing, even if Bitcoin is the safest, even if it's more stable than the dollar, it's only as good as people are willing to hold it. And if banks are just not willing to hold it, they're just not going to have it.
That demand's going to go away. And I don't know if because you're the economist in the channel, do you know what three things classify a currency or like a store of money, or like not a store of money, like a currency? They mentioned it in Random Walk, but I forgot. I think value, it's like it has to store value.
Exchange, and the third one's slipping me.
So the medium of exchange, Bitcoin as a currency, you can exchange it as long as obviously no regulation comes in that limits that. I think he says that that's the one that you can check off. Like, okay, Bitcoin might do that. Store of value, you not really, because a dollar of Bitcoin today could be worth 2 cents in the future, or it could be worth more. So it's not necessarily as strong of a store of value as the dollar, because the dollar is managed by a central bank at the end of the day. And obviously there's inflation, but you know that a dollar today is going to be at least worth 80 cents in 10 years or close to it, because there's a central bank controlling it. Am I wrong in that statement or no?
Because the big statement that people will use on the Bitcoin side for that, and it does have some value, is the dollar used to be different than Bitcoin in that statement because it was backed by gold. Then after,
yeah.
I forgot the name of the convention that was held in New Hampshire, I think it was Woodland or whatever, that it unpledged the dollar from gold, and it actually became a fiat currency. That's why Bitcoin now is so much useful, because at the end of the day, Bitcoin and dollars have the same backing behind. The big difference, like you said at the beginning, is the dollar is actually backed by the United States. The Bitcoin is not backed by anyone, which goes back to the same spot of decentralization and not being regulated is both an advantage and a disadvantage. I think we couldn't go through this conversation without mentioning that famous convention where they unpledged the dollar. Because even like the guy that wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I'm a big fan of, who is also a big proponent of Bitcoin, that's literally like the first thing he mentions when he's trying to push Bitcoin.
Right, but you have the U.S. government, and you know that the central bank, Daddy Powell, is gonna it's gonna try his best to maintain the value of the dollar. There's no one or nothing or no computer working to maintain the value of Bitcoin. It could go up, yes, to $1 million, like many people are saying, and $10 million, whatever. But it could also go down to $1,000 if the demand quickly dies out. Like, that's my fear. There's nothing, absolutely nothing stopping Bitcoin from going to zero. And I think there's something stopping the dollar from going to zero, because if that happens, we would have way bigger problems.
No, and I guess one of my last comments to kind of wrap it up was, I remember when we studied like chemistry, when literally my first year here in the United States, where I saw the difference of like kilometers and liters everywhere else in the world, or here the US being gallons and miles. I remember the teacher explaining to us that the reason why the US is that way is because changing every single gas station and changing every single sign on the streets from the pound system to like kilometers and liters will be extremely expensive. That's something that I think is looked up over, which is if the US will start using Bitcoin, you know how much money it would cost to change every single every single register in the United States to take Bitcoin, and all the infrastructure and all the accounts that people have to open, because you can't just have Bitcoin in a normal bank account. It would just be huge. And then I think even for us, you know, for our generation, I think it's something that we're not going to see. I don't know. I think for me, in summary, is it worth it as an investment? I think not. Is it worth even putting 2%, 5% of your portfolio? I'd rather not take the risk and not see the 1,000% increase and just use my conservative 7 to 8% that it has been yielding over the last 100 years or so, and I'll be happy with that. I don't have to get greedy. I just have to make the returns I'm expecting for. And as a currency, I think even less. I think the United States dollar and all the other well-known currencies are here to stay in the long term.
I think my final takeaway is, as an investment, I honestly, as both an investment and a currency, I have no idea. Like, I really don't understand it that much. And that's why I agree with you. I'm going to stay with the S&P 500. It's something I understand, and something that allows me to sleep at night. Random Walk describes the level of investment or the level of risk that you can take by measuring how well you sleep at night. And with the S&P, I sleep amazing at night. I feel like if I start buying Bitcoin, I'd be worried a lot more. I'd be checking a lot more its price. And so I think if people want to go and buy it, I'm not obviously a financial advisor, but I would recommend that you only use, like you mentioned, your fund money aspect, like the fun money part of your portfolio to buy into Bitcoin, 5-10%. That way you have exposure, you're part of the whole Bitcoin craze. But if it goes to zero, you only lost 10%. The majority of your money is invested in index funds, and you'll be fine in the future. So I think investing a portion of your portfolio is okay, small portion, just to get that exposure. And in case it goes to $1 million per coin, you'll catch that gain. But personally, I'm like you. I like to sleep at night. I hate checking my investments every single day, and I probably won't be investing anytime soon in Bitcoin. Like a video I made 3 years ago.
All the people that are Bitcoin fans are probably going to comment a bunch of boomers. They don't know, but maybe yeah, maybe no. We'll see.
Subscribe.